All right. Good evening. Thank you for joining. This evening's Corvallis School Board meeting for April 25th is called to order. This evening we have present Budget Committee members, and I don't know if we have to actually go around and name all of them.
We'll do introductions.
Okay, great. We're going to do introductions. So I'm just going to turn things over to Ryan.
Do you want to bring up the slides?
What are we doing?
All right. Well, thank you for being here tonight. For those of you that are new to this process, whenever you are wanting to speak and use the mic, there is a rectangular button down near the base, and you just hold that for a second, and then your mic will have a green light, and then you'll know that you are hot and ready to speak. So again, welcome. I'm Ryan Noss. I'm the superintendent. And I appreciate the volunteers of the Budget Committee being here and our board as well. So we're just going to go around because some of you are new, some of you have been at this for a while, but just who you are, years of service on the Budget Committee in particular, and then role in the community. Erin, would you mind going first?
Hi, I'm Chris Hawkins. I'm on the school board. This is my first year, so this is also my first year in this process. Hi, my name is...
Now you can talk. Okay.
I have failed Mike 101, but we have now been remediated and are okay. I'm Tisha Morel. This is my first year on the committee, and I am a community member volunteer.
Hi, my name is Judah Largent. I use pronouns. This is also my first year as a school board member, so my first year on this committee. Very excited to be here.
And I have a backup. I'm Penny York. I think this is my third year on this budget committee, and I am retired from a variety of things.
I'm Sarah Finger McDonald. This is my 7th year on the school board, so my 7th year going through this process.
My name is Andrew Freeborg. He, him, his pronouns. This is my 4th year on the budget committee and just a regular Joe.
My name is Therese Jones. I'm the co-vice chair for the Corvallis School Board. This is my 7th year, 8th year, somewhere in that vicinity. And I am filling in this evening for Dr. Whitebear, who is unable to be. She's excused from the meeting tonight. That's what I was going to say.
Hi, I'm Lauren Wolf. I'm the Director of Finance for the Corvallis School District. This is my first year leading the work on the Budget Committee, but third year with CSD.
Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Harder. I'm the Assistant Superintendent here in the Corvallis School District. I use she, her pronouns. This is my 5th year in this role.
And this is my 5th minute on the committee as a community volunteer, retired educator, worked in this district and a few others. Oh, and I also substituted this afternoon at Bessie Coleman Elementary. Yay, thank you. I need a nap.
I'm Bill Doherty, and this is my 6th year on the Budget Committee, and it will be my last year. So I'm looking forward to seeing this one through.
Ryan always makes me introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Benz, so different name, but I have been on serving as this committee secretary, 15 years, about? And I think we have one virtual.
Thanks, Jennifer. This is Shauna Tomini. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry to not be there with you in person tonight, but I'm grateful to be able to join remotely. My name is Shauna Tomini. I use she, her pronouns, and I have the pleasure of serving as the co-vice chair along with Therese for the school board. And this is my 3rd year serving on the school board.
All right, and so for our agenda this evening, really the purpose of this meeting is training, so information about the role of the budget committee with regards to the adoption of the district's budget, and also some information for you in terms of our current finances, and again, an opportunity for you to have some training before our first official budget committee meeting, and an opportunity to have a little bit more of a conversation around what the role is and where we are with our finances. So that's, again, the agenda and the goal for this evening. And then in terms of meeting norms, some of the things we try to focus on is use of meeting time. So we try to stay on time, orderly procedures. One of the things that's important as the budget committee is coming up with questions or things that they want to know more about is balancing the amount of staff time to pull those materials together. So we anticipate that you will have requests for additional information, but trying to balance that with the amount of time we have available with our staff. And then this has been the norm all along, but that respectful collaboration as we work through and talk about some difficult and challenging topics, such as budget and current finances. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lauren, who will be taking us through the first component, which is, again, a little bit about the budget process and the timelines and steps that we take.
All right, so the first thing we're going to go over is just the budget process in general. So this whole process is governed by Oregon's local budget law, which is designed to establish standard procedures for preparing, presenting, and administering the budgets of Oregon local governments. It encourages citizen involvement in the preparation of the budget before final adoption. It provides a method of estimating revenues, expenditures, and proposed taxes. It institutes a method of control for revenues and expenditures that promotes efficiency and economy when using public funds and encourages citizen involvement. So as you can see by the cycle up here, I know it's a bit small to fit this whole timeline on one screen here, but it's not something that we just do once a year. It's a continuous process, and it really takes a full 12 months to complete this cycle. So it occurs in 4 different parts. First, we prepare the budget, which is what we're currently working on right now, what you see indicated by that orange rectangle. Then the budget committee meets. So this meeting is not technically a budget committee meeting. This is just an informational orientation session. So our next meeting will be the first budget committee meeting. There has to be at least one meeting held to receive the budget message, which Ryan will deliver. And then you will also receive the full budget document. And at that meeting, we will also hear public comment. Each member of the budget committee will be provided a copy of the proposed budget, and then we will distribute copies to you. Jen will reach out with that information when they're ready for you before the meeting. And then at that point, it will become a public document. So then just some rules to guide your work on the budget committee. You cannot get together in person, by phone, or email before the advertised meeting to discuss the budget. All discussions around the budget need to be held in public meetings. And then after the initial meeting, we can meet as many times as needed to revise and approve the budget. And then once the committee is satisfied with the proposed budget, including any changes that we need to prepare, then the budget is approved. So if the budget requires a property tax to be in balance, the committee must approve an amount or rate of property taxes to be certified to the assessor, which we do as we receive property taxes as well as our local option levy. Then a public hearing is held on the approved budget. After it's approved, a hearing, then the hearing is held by the school board. And then we will publish a summary that has been approved by the budget committee and the notice of the hearing. And again, at that hearing, we will also receive public testimony. So finally, the budget is adopted, and then we file all the necessary paperwork with the county and state. So we do need to have a resolution adopted no later than June 30th, as that's when our last appropriation runs out for the current fiscal year, and we cannot do anything financially related without an approved budget. So then after that, for the entirety of the fiscal year, we review that budget and report back to the school board on where we're at with those things. Okay. So here's some information on the roles and responsibilities of the budget committee. So the budget committee does hear the budget message. They hear and consider public comment. They discuss and revise the budget as needed, approve the budget, and then approve the tax rate and levy amount. The budget committee does not set salaries, benefits, or contractual terms. They do not set staffing levels or dictate the organizational structure. They cannot decide if a program or service should be funded, and they cannot make or alter district goals or policies, as that is a function of the school board. Okay, so now we're going to go into a quick orientation of the document itself. So there you will see a table of contents at the beginning of the document, and then there are 4 main sections. There will be the executive summary, which will include a copy of the superintendent's budget message, and really a comprehensive overview of the entire budget. It will talk about our strategic plan and any major factors to the current year budget. The next section is the organizational section, which will provide general information about the district, the geographic area served, the number of schools and students, and any significant policies that impact the budget, finances, procedures, and regulations. Then you really get into the meat of the document, which is the financial section. And the financial section contains all of the required information for the district funds and descriptions of significant revenue sources and expenditure categories. And then at the very back, there is a section that has all of the historical information on our schools, and as well as like staffing levels, property tax information, and any measures that have been filed by the district. Okay, and then just to provide a little help on reading that really sort of dense information in the financial section, just a quick kind of overview of how the account code structure works. So under local budget law, we are required to follow this basic format. A fund, let's see, click for me. A fund is a fiscal and accounting entity with self-balancing accounts set aside to carry on a specific activity or meet certain objectives in accordance with specific regulation. So the requirements and resources in a fund must always balance, and every budget has at least one fund, commonly called the general fund, which is used for your everyday operations. So currently we utilize the 5 different fund types displayed there: general fund, special revenues, which is all of our grants, our 300 level funds, which is our debt service. We have PERS debt, and we also have the general obligation debt that we're paying back from the bond. And then the 400 level funds, that fund is much smaller than you have seen in past years, as all those wonderful bond projects are just about wrapped up, but we still do hold some monies there. And then 600 is our internal services, which we use to pay benefits for our 2 union groups, as well as a risk management fund. The next level speaks to our programs that we have within our schools in the district as a whole. These are called our functions, and these are all, again, dictated by the required state method, and we use the program budgeting and accounting manual that is published by the Oregon Department of Education, which follows the administrative rule. So the function describes the activity for which the service or material object is required. So our major functions, again, are listed there. The 1,000 levels are instruction, so that's like our elementary programs would be an example of that. Support services, that would be our Office of the Principal. Community services, our biggest community service group is food service, so all of that is under that 3,000 level function. The 4,000s are facilities, acquisition, and construction, all of that really related to the capital improvement funds. 5,000 are other, which is more interagency transfers, debt service payments, things like that. And then 6,000 and 7,000 are set aside for contingency and unappropriated reserve. Okay. And then the next level of our accounting codes is our objects. So these are line item expenditures, and it speaks to what that account code really is about. So the major objects of a district are classified into 8 areas. We have salaries, benefits, and associated payroll costs, so your federal tax, PERS, those sort of things. Purchase services, 400s are supplies and materials, 500 is capital outlay, 600 is other objects, 700 is transfers, and 800 is other uses. Okay, so now it's time for the test. Okay. So I just wanted to provide you some examples so you can see what this looks like as you would actually be reading through. I don't expect you to all just know this answer like I do, read these numbers in my sleep, but this one here, you can see that the fund is that first 3 digits, the 100, which is our general fund, 1291 is for English language learners, and then 0111 is for licensed salaries. Here's a couple more just to show you, to kind of track what changes as those different parts of the code changes. Okay, any questions on that? No? I think you should know.
One question that we
Okay.
typically get is, when will the budget document be made available to members of the budget committee?
I want to say it's 17th, 18th of May. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. It's right, we'll have it out to you, and you will get an electronic copy, or can come pick one up from Jen in the district office.
We published that it would be publicly available the date of the meeting or before.
We try to give it to you before because it's not something that I think you probably just take the almost 300 pages and be able to have questions ready for a meeting, so. Yeah, we're hopeful to have it out by then. And we are currently on track, so we're gonna go with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now for the fun stuff, a financial update. And some of this for the board will be a little repetitive, but I wanted to make sure everybody was starting with the same information. So if you have seen some of these slides before, just hang with me. So the most important thing when we start looking at our budget is really the general fund. This slide here shows how we fund the general fund. So our revenues in the general fund are made up of the state school fund formula, so that's 84%, 12% of our local option, and then 4% other revenues. So as the biggest one is really the state school fund. I wanted to get into that a little bit further here and talk about what that is. So it's a combination of state and local funds dedicated to the operation of K-12 public schools. It includes local property taxes, other county and state level grants, and a 70% reimbursement for transportation expenses. The most important thing to remember is that it is a equalization formula, so we don't, just because we have higher property taxes in Benton County does not mean that we receive more money. They balance that out. So if we get more property taxes from Benton County, we'll get less money from the state. So the state school fund is appropriated biannually by the Oregon legislature, and our current allocation is $10.2 billion. And it provides funding to us on a weighted per student basis. And this number changes a little bit here and there throughout the year, but the estimated funding for 23-24 is around $10,000 per weighted student. So when we talk about weighted students, it's based on our average daily membership, not the number of students that are enrolled in our school system. They have to be in school, and it's based on that. The weighted portion of that, we have weights for students who are English language learners, students who are pregnant and parenting, students on individual educational plans, students in poverty, and students in foster care. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. I don't mind. So the other significant portion of our general fund is the local option levy. We're fortunate to be in a community that has supported that multiple times in a row, and that allows us to do some pretty great things for our students. So the local option levy supports teachers at all schools to sustain or reduce class sizes. So I pulled the information from the current local option levy as well as the last cycle here. And you can tell in the first column we have our elementary K-5 target class sizes, middle school in the middle, and then high school on the far right. And since 2017, we have managed to stay at or below those class sizes, which is pretty great. The local option levy also supports 50% of our music, PE, and art teachers at all elementary schools. So we currently allocate the following minutes of instruction for music, art, and PE each week. And just a note there that the local option levy, while it does pay for those things, it covers about 50% of the salaries. And the other half is funded by the general fund. It supports vocational and technical education opportunities for students, and there's a list of some of our current programs there that our students are getting to participate in. It funds school counselors and social workers, instructional coaches and mentors to help improve teaching and learning, and then also extracurricular activities and athletics. So it funds about 43% of the extracurricular and athletics. Okay, now we're on the other side of that, which is our requirements, so our expenditures. About 79% of our general fund expenditures are salary and benefits costs. So for every dollar of salary we pay to an employee, we pay 34 cents in additional expenses. That's what makes up that category. The 15% purchase services, so that's things like our transportation contract, all of our utilities, which is the bulk of that. 4% is supplies, which is all of your consumables in the buildings. And then 2% other, a lot of like small dues and fees and things of that nature. Oops. Yeah.
And benefits?
Yeah, so about the cost on that?
Yeah, you said 79% came from, I mean,
So-
that's what takes up this 100%, but then you gave another percentage.
Correct, yeah, so we, for every dollar that we pay out in salaries, we pay 34 cents in expenses. So that goes to state and federal taxes, it goes to PERS, which is the major factor there, which is the biggest difference between being a public employer and being private. Okay, so this includes our cost assumptions that we used in that big circle there. When we look at our budget for next year, we wanted to retain the ESSER 3 positions that we had, which is about 19.23 FTE. We apply step increases to our 3 different employee groups, so that costs about $1.25 million. We assumed a 5% COLA for all employee groups, which is at a cost of about $3.1 million. Just of note, we have contracts for 2 of our groups, and we are currently bargaining with another. We applied a $50 increase in insurance contribution to all employee groups at a cost of about $430,000, and then we apply a 6% increase in non-payroll related expenses. So that's assuming things like the cost of consumables, the increase for utilities and things like that. So our total cost.
Can you explain the top one, retain ESSER positions? I'm not familiar.
Sure. Yeah, so, and we'll get into it a little bit further down the line, but ESSER was a program that was put out by the federal government in a response to the impact of COVID on K-12. And with those dollars, we have pushed more supports into the classroom to try to help support students as we're working on regaining the learning loss.
A follow-up. So that's federal funding that's going away?
Correct.
And so this is to backfill that?
Correct.
So previously, I didn't see anything about title funds or federal money coming in?
So right now, we really take a look at our general fund, as that's our true operations. Everything, like title, for example, is a really good example where the things that we fund with title are supposed to be in addition to general operating. So they call it supplement versus supplant. We can't use title funds to pay for things that we are already doing. We use title funds to add on additional supports at our designated title schools.
I don't think I asked that clearly. So in which category from the previous slide are those title funds?
They're in the special revenues funds, and those stay fairly stable year over year. Sort of the unfortunate part about title specifically and any of our federal funds is the federal government runs on a completely different fiscal year than we do, and so it starts 10/1. So we don't generally have the information we need to we have budget assumptions for those grants because we can track year over year allocations, but we don't have final numbers usually by the point that we're putting together a budget. I know, for example, title released preliminary allocations yesterday, and I know that it's in alignment with what we received, so we kind of just continue that plan and make adjustments in the fall once we actually have a signed grant agreement in hand. So when we talk about the the state school fund, and part of that really is the enrollment, right? So our number of students in our system is what dictates how much we get paid. So what you see here is our enrollment projection for next year. We developed these using cohort survival rates and birth rates. Cohort survival is a commonly used demographic technique that looks at the number of students in a given grade and determines how many of those students will move up to the next grade or school level. So because we don't have a cohort to compare in kindergarten, we use birth rates to generate that number there. And we use the birth rates in the state of Oregon, Corvallis, and Benton County. Shauna, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Okay. So when you look at this here, it's important to note that okay. Give me 1 second. We're back. Okay. So it's important to note that we are projecting 2 of our elementary schools to be under 300 students next year. So the total enrollment decrease next year is about 1.2%, 75 students. Okay. Any questions? Are we good? Yeah.
Yeah, quick question. So thank you for bringing all of this. The schools that are under 300, what is their capacity? How many students could they have if we had more students to put into them?
Oh, you're thinking?
I'm thinking about numbers. The 2 schools are basically built with 2 classrooms per grade level plus an additional classroom. So they have historically had closer to 350 kids than they have than where we're at right now. And when we went into the bond project, we looked at sort of where our community felt would be the appropriate size for an elementary school, and that 350 number was what people thought a lot about. When we built this school and we built Bessie Coleman, it has the capacity for 3 per grade level, but generally speaking, we've tried to keep our schools around 350 at the elementary.
Okay. All right, so if we look here at our enrollment trends year over year, this gives a little bit of a further out picture of what's going on. So a lot of the conversation has been around how COVID has impacted enrollment in schools. We know statewide we have a lot less students in our state receiving public education, but I think it's just important to acknowledge that this was something happening in Corvallis School District specifically prior to COVID. So the dark blue lines that you see there show our enrollment numbers that have been slowly declining actually since about 2017. The green is our projection for next year. And then we have the 3 following years. So it stops there, as that's the kindergarten birth rate data that I currently have. So over the last 5 years, we've decreased by almost 600 students, or about 9%. And we can see that this trend is projected to continue based on the number of births. Okay. This is for current year. So you can see, I mean, if you're thinking about, okay, so why is this happening year over year? I think this shows that pretty well. The orange are all of our grade levels that are currently over 500. Green are grade levels that are in the 400s. And then the blue is our grade levels that are in the 300s. So when we're graduating out a class of 566 and we have kinder class coming in of 355, there's a bit of a difference there.
And we continue to anticipate blue lines based on birth rates. So we know that our 4-year-olds or 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds, as they come into school, those classes are going to be in the 300s as well.
So all of these things that I've shared so far are all of the pieces, that we take into consideration when we put together a forecast. So that first section is showing the previous 21-23 biennium. The section that's in the orange rectangle is the biennium that we are currently in. We are in year 1 of the biennium, which means that we know the state school fund allocation for 24-25. And then this is a very crystal ball, as my predecessor Olivia would say, projection for 25-27, because I have no idea what the state is going to allocate to us, but that number is just based on historical percentages. But the important thing to see there is that in the current year, we are on track as far as our operating expenditures and not operating at much of a deficit. You can see with all of those assumptions that have been put into the budget that we will be operating at a deficit of $10.9 million next year if we do not take corrective action. We are projected to be over our threshold on the ending fund balance this year, which allows us to spend that down to the required reserve amounts to help alleviate some of that $10.9 billion, but it still requires an $8.2 million correction for us in the next fiscal year.
One thing I would want to highlight for folks that are new to the budget committee, we have a biennial budget from the state, and so for next year we know our numbers are firm, and that's why the last two columns are a projection, because we don't know what will happen during the legislative session and what sorts of roll-up we will receive as we get that budget. Typically that happens in June, and we're still obligated to adopt a budget. And so there will be, in a year from now, we will be making some assumptions about what we think those numbers are, but we won't have hard numbers. Traditionally, we don't have hard numbers when the board adopts the budget.
Okay, so the question I get asked a lot is, how did this happen? And what were the factors? Okay, so the first one, you guys have all, I think, heard this conversation at this point about the ESSER funding cliff. So we utilized one-time funds. The ESSER funds were relief dollars that were pushed by the federal government to address the impact of COVID-19 on education communities. CSD specifically, we received about $10.8 million, and we used those funds to address physical health and safety for staff and students, meet students' academic, social, and emotional needs, and provide operational continuity. I personally am really proud of how we've used the dollars in Corvallis. We used them as they were intended, and they went to students and our staff that stuck with us during that time. There's other districts that have used them in other ways and maybe aren't experiencing such a large cliff from that, but I don't believe how they used the dollars was necessarily in the spirit of how they were supposed to address learning loss. So We knew this was coming, and we were prepared for that. It's still a factor, and it's still something that's unfortunate that we have to address.
So as an example, we wanted to make sure that in all of our K and first grade classes coming out of the pandemic that there were 2 adults in all classrooms. And so that was an intentional decision, knowing that while those were one-time dollars, which you are cautious about spending on staffing, we knew that that was important as kids transitioned back. And at the same time, we didn't use those dollars on things like facility improvements or things like that that are more one-time costs, because we knew the needs of our students coming back. So I stand by that decision, and I know that it also has implications, but I still believe that was the right way to move forward.
Okay, so the second factor here is the birth rates that we've talked about. So you can see the data points that are circled in orange there. We have in several years have had disproportionate decrease in births compared to the state of Oregon as well as Benton County. So if you look, for example, in 2020, the state of Oregon experienced a decrease of 4.9% in births. Benton County had a decrease of 6%, but Corvallis boundary zip codes had a decrease of 12.5%. And so that really impacts the number of kinders that are coming into our schools. So the next question that I get after that is, why are people in Corvallis school district zip codes having less children? Now we get to talk about this subject that we're probably all familiar with, but the housing availability crisis that we experience in our city. So this graph is sourced from the City of Corvallis website, and this shows in the gray the number of existing units, and then the blue is the newly permitted units, but they're not built yet. And then the orange is the need to meet population projections, like so people who are already currently living here. And then that pink line that's way up there is essentially all the people that want to live here but can't, so they commute here to work here. So you can see there's a pretty big difference in between our availability and what's being planned currently and what the need actually is. So I do know that they're, based on what the information that I read on the city's website, that they estimate that Corvallis needs 177 new housing units per year, every year until 2036 to meet the backlog of need, basically, and of our projected population growth. So, and then addition to that, they need 500 new housing units per year to meet the production goals. And lastly, this one is not my favorite because of what it says, but when I saw this graph that my colleagues put together from Hillsborough School District, it made my finance and data heart very happy, and I think it shows a really good picture, but hang with me while I walk through all of the lines here. We'll start at the bottom, and the dark blue bar graph shows the K-12 state school fund allocation in $1 billion since the 03-05 biennium. You will then see, let's see, it was in the 17-19 biennium that we added Measure 98, we added the student investment account, and then most recently we have added the early literacy grant. So in total, in the current year biennium, with all of those grants combined with the state school fund, the state is allocating us $11.7 billion. The light blue line that sits just above that is the quality education model calculation. And I would argue that is lower than what it probably actually is because it's so hard to calculate as districts operate very differently from one to another. But as you can see, those lines never intersect. So since the beginning of this data in 03-05, we have never been fully funded at K-12. The next interesting line is that orange one, which shows, and the dollar amounts I don't think are really important here, but just pay attention to kind of the trajectory of the lines. That is the Oregon State's general fund and lottery budget. So their line is increasing at a significantly quicker rate than the funding that is being allocated to K-12. The highest green line up there, that is showing K-12's percentage of the overall Oregon State general fund budget, which you can see our share of the total state revenues has been going down since 1921 biennium. That's a problem. Questions? Okay, so we have this deficit. We need to take corrective action. What are we going to do? We started to look at this in several different buckets because at first that's just a really overwhelming amount, and we needed to make sure that we were tackling this problem in a meaningful way. So the first thing we did was we looked at our class sizes. We use a formula to allocate classroom teachers to the number of students. Less students, unfortunately, means that the number of classroom teachers decreases as well. So we adjusted the school level enrollment projections, and actually we only ended up changing the enrollment projection at elementary because when we saw the classroom, if we increase the class size target at middle or high, the impact was too significant on our elective type courses that we would be able to offer, and so we wanted to preserve those as much as we could. So we kept those class sizes stable there, and then at the elementary, we did increase those targets to 1, which brought us back to the pre-COVID levels. So that right there was a correction of $2.8 million off of that 8.2. No, it affects all grade levels. We only changed the class size at the elementary, but all grade levels will be having less students in their building, so we did adjust their staffing to the number of students projected. The second bucket of money, the $4.6 million, we took that to department levels, so the district office level operates several departments, so I will try to remember them all. We have the superintendent's office, the assistant superintendent's office, we have student growth and experience, we have communications, we have business services, we have human resources, we have technology, we have facilities and operations. Did I get them all? Okay, so that's what I'm talking about there. What did I forget? Oh, and nutrition. Food and nutrition services. So we went to departments and said, we want to keep the reductions as far away from the classroom as we can, and we need you guys to make a pretty significant cut. For most, what that amount looks like is really about between an 11 and 12% cut at our departments. So if you remember the resource or the requirements graph, the biggest green portion, salaries and benefits. So there's really no way of doing that without touching FTE. And then we also, because those departments are smaller on the FTE side and their total overall percentage of the general fund is smaller, there were non-payroll related things in there as well. So for example, our facilities department, has really had to put all projects on pause, and we will be focusing only on reactive maintenance. So that was a big portion of the decrease. And then the $800,000 is what we call school support allocation. That is all a decrease in FTE, which is full-time employee. And so that looks like our other support pieces at our schools, which are non-classroom teachers. That's a combination of certified, classified, and we have some non-represented staff that are included in that reduction.
The one piece around the department budget is that in those departments, there are impacts that happen both at the central office level, but also at the school level. As an example, if you are in charge of food service, then you, or nutrition services, then you also have responsibility for the staff that are in kitchens. And so that's still part of your budget, even though, so as a department, there are implications both at the district level and at a school level. We haven't made reductions in nutrition services, but that's an example of how that, how to clarify that point.
Just as an extra on that, food service is completely self-sustainable, so they fund themselves, which is why they were held harmless in this situation. Okay, so this is hard work, and it's not necessarily fun when you're talking about these large of reductions. And so these are the things that we use to guide this process, which are our budget parameters that the board adopts. The first is that goals for student outcomes should drive the budget process, provide every student with equitable access and opportunities. Decisions should be informed by data, base resourcing decisions on the total value created for students, critically re-examine patterns of spending, take a long-term perspective. That's especially important when we look at this is not a one year problem, as we will be continuing to experience declining enrollment. And I don't think that there's a dollar amount that we will be allocated next year from the state that will completely alleviate that situation for us. And then next is be transparent. Okay. Pausing here. That's the end of really all of the information portion that I have for you tonight. Is there anyone that has any discussion items they'd like to bring up, or questions or requests for additional information?
I imagine, at least I know I have several questions, but I'm wondering if there is a format for submitting those questions that might be, I don't know that you necessarily could answer them right off. So would you like us to list our questions now if we know them, or would you like us to come up with a system for submitting questions?
I'm happy to answer any questions that I do know, and if I don't, I will get back to you on them. Okay. But we can keep track of those and get you the information. Okay.
One other thing I would encourage is, as questions come up, to feel free to send those in an email format. Don't feel like this is, if you didn't ask it tonight, then you need to wait. It's important that we get those questions so that we're prepared to answer them when we come back together.
You could send those to me via email, please.
She'll keep me on track. Okay, Therese, go for it.
Well, first let me ask, do any others have questions that you'd like to start with? Okay, I'll go ahead and start then. Okay, so I have a question. I don't expect you to answer it necessarily right at this moment, but I would like to know the rationale behind. We've got a couple of buildings that have fewer students than they can hold, and we've got several buildings that don't have the maximum number of students that they could hold. So from your perspective, what is the tipping point at which we would need to evaluate if we need to keep all of our buildings open if our student population continues to decline?
Do you want me to take care of you?
That is a conversation that we would need to have in the future, I believe. One of the things that I have thought about has been not just the number component of that question, but the examples like the location. Mountain View is a perfect example of that, knowing that its location is closer to Adair and north of town, some of the implications of a school like that. So I think that numbers play a part of will play a part in that answer, but I think there's a lot of other context as well. I know that there have been recent conversations about schools closures in other communities. Bethel's an example of that, where they have an elementary that's going to be closing after next school year based on the enrollment there. We're not at that point yet to be able to make any sort of definitive next step on that, but it is something that we will have to consider in the future if enrollment continues to decline as it is.
And just in case anybody's watching, because this is probably a really exciting meeting, I'm not in any way suggesting we should be at the place of closing a school. I'm just curious. I'm looking around at other communities, and I'm looking at those numbers from what we're projecting out. And at some point, it seems like if those numbers really don't turn around, it would be an inevitability. And so I just wanted to kind of get a sense of what, and I appreciate you talking about geography as something that you would weigh in, because I think that is a really important component that is not going to be able to be measured just by the numbers. There are also a lot of factors like where housing goes in that's going to artificially control geography, and so we do have to think about equitably making sure that all of our communities can be accessible for students. So thank you for pointing that piece out. I'll see if anyone else has a question before I go on.
Could I add one more component to that? So again, with the Mountain View example, being one of the two schools below 300, next year their principal, Byron Betheridge, will be taking on some additional responsibilities, recognizing that piece as well.
Okay, others have questions?
If you could put your slides back up and go back to where the cuts were being made. Yeah, the one just before that.
Let's see. This one?
Yeah, so the 0.8 million for the school support allocations, did you say that was going to be like the paraprofessionals and the teacher aides, and who fill into that category?
It's a combination of different groups, both classified and certified, but it's all the additional supports in a school building that aren't teachers. So there's several individuals that support work in the office. We have administrative assistants, office managers, health room assistants. We have library media, counselors, social workers. There's a whole long list of different positions that go into that category. So it's just everyone. Principals are included in that category. Career center specialists, assessment techs, just anyone in a school who is not a classroom teacher fits into school support. And I'm not listing off a list of positions that we have eliminated. I'm just giving you examples of positions that would fall in that category.
Yeah, I guess I was having difficulty separating that out from the departments and administrative staff.
Yeah, so the departments is all at the district level, all at the district office. But within that, for example, Melissa's department, student growth and experience, they support a lot of things that are happening in the building. So for example, all of our mental health staff is under that department. And so that would be something that's included at the department level that does impact schools. So there's, it's really all intertwined. It's pretty complicated.
The way I think about it is I think about if there is a coordinator or director position at the district office, then they oversee a department that has a lot of different components within that department. And so those were department reductions. And so it was decisions primarily from a coordinator or director and looking at the staff that they supervise or have in support.
I just have a comment. I just wanted to thank you, Lauren, for doing such a great job on this as a new person. This is very well organized, and the way that you've made it easy to understand, the clarity of it all, I really appreciate. I know it was a lot of work, so thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Other questions? Great.
And this might be something we can't answer in this meeting, but what I'm hearing from the community as families are learning about the cuts, just a lot of uncertainty about how those cuts were decided on and how that's going to impact school for the next year. So things like hearing about you're really making sure that we're preserving the electives at middle school and high school, I think is a message some of the community needs to hear, because there's a lot of concern right now that we know I sat on the couch and cried about the loss of the art teacher with my daughter who loves him. And I'm hearing from a lot of the parents who I know from middle school and high school level concerns as they're seeing those cuts to teachers who teach electives about the availability of electives for the next year. So I think as we're going through this, I feel like we are learning some things about how decisions were being made and what's being preserved that the community would probably benefit from hearing.
Thank you. And I think the other piece that keeps coming up for me is thinking about the implications of the graphs that we shared with you, and for our community to begin to understand and recognize the implications of affordable housing and the ability for folks to live in this community, and for kids to be able to, young families to be able to have kids in this community. And when that becomes a barrier, then we are going to continue to see these challenges, because we are part of a larger community, and we are the ones who are feeling that. And at the same time, we're going to have to think about how do we continue to advocate for decisions that allow us to continue to have a broad array of programs, and that's only possible when we have kids in our houses.
Yeah, I also was gonna, I mean, this was another aside, but I was gonna ask if these slides could be available, because I've already been asked by one elementary school to come to a PTA meeting and talk about how the budget decisions are being made right now. And so having some of your fabulous, very clear information would be helpful as school groups may be reaching out to other board members also about doing that.
Yeah, we'll have at least a PDF version available probably tomorrow. We usually just post the slides after the meetings, but it'll be linked in board book and we can let you know when it's available. I would also just point out that as we're hearing from community members and staff about how these decisions are impacting the building, I know that we can sit here and we can talk about it, and I can show you slides and it's really organized, and I can talk about it without, I don't know if I might not be coming across that I'm very upset about it or impacted by it, and I think it's just we've been doing this work since December, and none of the decisions that we've made as a district leadership team have been made lightly, and they were all really hard decisions, and we didn't, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have been making any cuts. So, I mean, it's the framework that we're working within, and we're bound to, and we're trying to do that work the best we can.
And I think, those of us who are on the board this was not a surprise to us, and we know about the work that has been done for a long time, and I think some assurance to our community about the care with which it was made, those decisions were made, I think would give people some assurance about that their kids are going to still have a good experience in school.
Yeah. And typically, what Brian and I have discussed is this is not a short-term problem. And so what we have discussed is typically we present the financials to you, and it's in the bottom of your agenda, and no actions required, and a lot of times not any discussion is taken on those, which is fine. But I would like to come to the board at least quarterly to start the year to provide an actual presentation to you about how the budget outlook is, so that the community can have some more narrative around that versus just a schedule with a bunch of numbers on it. And then as we really get more heavy into the work after the beginning of the year, then we could provide a monthly update to you to help with that communication and transparency piece.
Other questions? Yes.
So I think a couple questions from the slide, if you could put that back up. And I think it's more clarification, so I understand. So the 800,000 on the school support allocations, the previous slide on the ESSER, and the district's making a commitment to fill that back in. So the supports that are provided from the ESSER and that 19 point whatever FTE in this right here, in my brain it seems like there's some overlap, but
Yeah.
So job titles, I don't know if that's the proper way to say it, but that would
Correct.
be helpful for me to understand.
Yeah, so largely what we're funding right now through our ESSER are educational assistants, which are also a part of school support allocations, right? So those are the paraprofessionals in our buildings that are helping students in the classrooms. And so that is a part of that, but we haven't seen that need has gone away, so we're trying to preserve those positions where we can. Another important factor that we haven't touched on tonight is that during this entire process, we have known that we have to leave our special education FTE where it is. We have more and more students coming into our system. I think this is our either first year or second year where we've exceeded the state cap, and so the state cap we are funded for 11% of our total number of students if they are on IEPs, and so we are over that cap now, which means we know that those students are receiving additional supports, and we are not being paid for that. So that's kind of part of that advocacy piece at the state level. So yes, some of that FTE is in there, but we are trying to preserve those positions as they are most directly connected with students.
So my second question is, in all three categories, FTE, and again, what maybe helps me is, what are the categories of jobs from those FTEs for all three? Is that information that the committee gets to look at or see?
Are you talking about positions that would fall within those, or just the cuts that we have made from those categories, position specific?
Yeah, the cuts and anticipated cuts, I think for all three categories.
Do you want me to answer that? Okay. So in the first category, the class sizes and staffing, that's our classroom teachers, because as we have less students, and we say we're having 28 students per classroom, that's how we're allocating, then that's a formula, and if most schools that resulted in a decrease in classroom teachers. We also adjusted our elementary enrichment, which is art, music, and PE. Those are also based on number of classrooms. So if number of classrooms goes down, the FTE in that category also goes down. So that's what you see in that first blue category of the class sizes and staffing. In the departments, this one is a very long list. I can give you some examples, and I won't remember all of them off the top of my head. For example, my department last year was 9 full-time employees. It will now be 6 full-time employees. So that was really the significant cut that we had to take. We will no longer have a risk manager. We will not have a benefits specialist, and we will also not have our financial analyst. So those are pretty big positions that we will be missing in our department. Within departments, we've had to reduce some project crew time. That is out of the facilities and maintenance department. Some custodial staff and reevaluating the model in which we use to keep our buildings in good condition. There's some maintenance staff in that number as well. Technology had to reduce some SPOC positions, which is single point of contact, so they're tech and info service 1 positions. So there was some FTE reduced there. There was quite a bit of administrative assistant time that was reduced through this process. There was calendar changes, so employees that maybe work previously 260 days, we have decreased their calendars, and that results in a savings. For Melissa's department specifically, that another facilities and maintenance, and then teaching or student growth and experience are our biggest categories for district spending. A lot of that is resulting in curriculum adoptions that are going to need to pause as we continue to work through that. That's a huge expense. We're really not doing any professional development or travel. Lots of pieces like that won't be covered. Substitute time for professional development, that is all removed from the budget. So the list goes on and on. That's just the stuff that's popping to the top of my head right now.
So was that the question, or was it a specific FTE figure?
Yeah, no, I mean, those are the kind of details. And then, Ryan, you were talking about in that, some of that gets pushed into building, some of the services deal does, and so is FTE being cut in those areas as well? Are buildings losing some of the supports?
They will feel an impact of that as well. Both the district office and the buildings will feel that for sure. We are going to have to get used to a different level of service that we can provide, and that's just the reality of the situation right now.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Other questions? Okay, I have one more question. Well, many more questions, but one more question right now. So on the elementary, you had a slide that talked about the amount of art, music, and PE.
Mm-hmm.
So we are currently doing 80 minutes of art and 80 minutes of PE and 60 minutes of music at elementary, is that right?
They're currently allocated for 80 minutes of all 3 in this current fiscal year, 23-24.
And what will they be in the next?
The next year, music and PE will stay at 80 minutes, and art will go to 60 minutes a week.
So music is at 80 minutes now?
That is how it is allocated to the schools to use.
Not necessarily by how it's scheduled.
Correct. That is how we allocate the FTE to them.
Okay, that sort of makes sense to me. Okay, I think I understand that. And then at the middle school, are there any changes in these? Are we meeting, in other words, I'm asking, are we still going to meet the state requirement for
PE? No.
Okay.
That's my short answer.
It's a very short answer.
Which is the reason why we did not make any adjustments to the PE, the methodology of allocating FTE.
So the fuller answer is we're in a corrective action for elementary that will begin this year, which will be the 40-minute scheduled PE classes. So we're staffed for 40 minutes of PE per class. We will be holding 40-minute PE classes. That's what we're going to ask for. And then we have other corrective action that will take place the following year. And middle school, we're still in a corrective action that's going to require us to change our schedule, but not this year. We're going to have to look at it for next year.
Okay. And not related to the budget, will the PE correction at the middle school level impact the electives?
They absolutely will, and I said very clearly to ODE that was a problem for us.
Okay. And then what's the, sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
I'm just going to editorialize all night. And the reason why that's a problem for us is because we have programs like dual language and students who want to take electives. And when we put a priority on one area of education above all others, PE at the middle school, then that has implications that are not always well thought out or as intended, and that creates other situations like that we're trying to address.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question related to the impact of these changes is, what is the impact? I know there were changes to our library staffing, and so my understanding is that all of our elementary schools will now have half-time or roughly half-time library staff, and then, but the middle school and the high schools will stay at their current staffing level for libraries?
Yeah, so previously, the way we didn't necessarily allocate library media techs on a formula. So what we did this year, and I don't have the formula off the top of my head, but we gave them a certain number of minutes for each classroom in their building. So for example, Mountain View, who has fewer total classrooms, the FTE of the LMT position there is going to be a little bit less. We did leave the high school library as my understanding is that kids use the library at all times, like, and they're using it for study halls and for different things like that. So we needed to leave that alone. That was a big piece of feedback that we received from the high schools.
And about how much is the savings and the changes in allocations for the libraries?
I want to be cautious about how far we go into that without the budget document.
That's okay. I can send that question. We don't have to answer it right now.
I think that would be a good one for that. Okay. Lauren may know it off the top of her head, but I don't, so I'd rather look it up.
Any other not too granular level of questions about exact dollar numbers that you'd like to ask now?
Follow up on Teresa's question. So we talked about what's happening in libraries at elementary schools, and the high schools are unchanged. What's happening in middle schools?
For library specifically, I do not believe there was any changes there.
Staffing levels are staying the same.
For library specifically, I don't believe that there was any changes there, but I would need to double check.
One other thing to keep in mind that we didn't include, but I included earlier in the week when I did a presentation, was around collective bargaining agreements and seniority and the implications of seniority for staff members and how that has an impact across all three levels as you think about people with the same position. And so there are impacts sometimes in terms of the person rather than the program or the amount of support that comes out of that process that Jennifer Duvall has been working on tirelessly for quite some time to be able to account for all of those implications.
Yeah, I just wanted a little bit of clarification. I thought one of the first slides that you showed said that staffing levels was a board responsibility and not a finance committee responsibility. Is that correct? Thanks.
One thing to have in mind is when we take public comment during upcoming budget committee meetings, one of the pieces of one of the asks from the public testimony is if you're asking us to fill a position, a recommendation on where to reduce. So when we hear from people, we're gonna be having to think through that as they're bringing sort of that scenario forward that you just mentioned.
Any other last questions before any going once, going twice? How about on this side? No? Okay, all right. It looks like we have exhausted our questions that are immediately available to us. So if you have other questions, I think the instruction is that we want those sent to Jennifer. Is that right? Okay. So Jennifer, can you give us a timeline, or maybe it's you guys, can you give us a timeline of when you would like to receive questions to be able to have sufficient time to respond?
As soon as possible.
Okay, so as soon as possible,
Yeah.
if you have a question, please send it. That's the instruction. And I want to just double check that Shauna didn't have any questions, because I don't have any way to see if she's, like, maybe she's been waving at us and I don't know. But can we just double check anyone that can see her? Or let me just ask her, do you have any questions?
No, but thank you for checking, Teresa. I really appreciate it. I'll send any that I have in follow-up once I have a little more time to process.
Okay, wonderful. So then, with no further questions, I believe then we are, I will give you a reminder that our next Budget Committee meeting will be Thursday, May 23rd, at which time we will do the following things in relatively this particular order. We will elect a committee chair and vice chair, so please think about if that's a role that you would be willing to serve in. Then we will receive the superintendent's budget message. There will be an opportunity to receive public testimony. We will deliberate, and if there is time, we will approve the 24-25 budget tax rate and tax amount. According to my sheet right here in front of me, which you are nodding.
Apparently it's different now, sorry.
Oh, okay, so which sheet is correct?
The one up there.
Okay, I cannot see that one. Can you tell me what is different?
We can't approve the budget on the 23rd because we have posted that we will receive public testimony on the 30th as well. So there are two.
Okay. So we will not approve a budget on the 23rd. We will do all of those other things, but we will not approve a budget on the 23rd. And so, so amend that. Okay. And with that, I think that we don't have anything else we have to do this evening, right? So we can adjourn. So the Budget Committee meeting for the Corvallis School District adjourns at 7:51. Thank you all.